Perhaps sometimes for newness, we reach back into the past. In this case, quite literally. This is from chapter 4. I wrote this piece for Alicia maybe 5 years ago or 4 years ago, and she came in and we tracked a demo of it, and we were going to use it to start a project where her and I could work together. And then it got set aside, and when I finally arrived at Art Track's Chronicle and finally arrived at how the story idea is going to unfold, I immediately went back to this piece, and this was the first piece that was really reworked to set the tone for We Are Connected in terms of a piece. It's written for 8 cellos. There's no doubling, meaning it's 8 different cello parts. Other than that, it has really basic accompanimental ideas. This very opening, I'll play just the cello part so you can hear what it's doing. Very simple, a lot of space, just gently harmonized cello parts. We could call it harmonized. I actually think of them as 3 different lines, similar to some of the contrapuntal stuff that we've used in the previous tracks. So it starts like that, and this whole first half of the track embellishes on this idea. So when I sat down with the track after knowing now what the story is and how it's going to be implemented, I really struggled to find, how do I help tell the story? What do I add? And I went to the story as I typically do, and this chapter is really about a conversation. And I thought, wow, Alicia's the cello. This is her part of the conversation. What if we add Corbin's part of the conversation? And so out of that came Corbin responding to this cello part as if a conversation is unfolding. So we have their literal conversation where, using a vocoder, Corbin is stating what he says in the story against the conversation that goes on throughout the cello part as well. So this conversation goes and continues to build. I'll play you just the tail end of it as it leads into the new section. The other cellos now enter. Finally, we get away from just the 3 cellos. Now, in one of the ending of the tracks, maybe track 2, I talked about this idea of using polytonality to create more tension and create a sense of a need for resolution. In some of the other tracks that we've looked at, that polytonality does not get resolved, which leaves this giant question or this open void at the end of the track, which hopefully makes someone want to go on to the next track, right? But it's also can be musically effective. Here's a case where it starts very simple tonality, then we add non-chord tones or a completely different chord to begin with, and that a third layer, and this is to create tension and expectation, but in this case it actually does resolve, and at the point of resolution, finally senses of rhythm or senses of ongoing pulse enter, making it a great example of maybe that door has opened up into something. So let me play that transition so you can hear it. First sense. But for me, that point of resolution is a breath. It's a breath of comfort, but it starts something. And I love that idea, mainly because I feel philosophically that is what happens in a lot of aspects of our life. Then, once we get that resolution, we have the organ and the MS-20 sound come in as a bass line, and things just keep building. I'm just going to let it play for a little bit. One thing I love about a track like this is a performance, meaning we could have set up a click, and I think actually you can even see that we did for a lot of it. We're just right where my mouse is moving around. That is the click, the meters that are happening. But how we actually tracked it So we tracked one part, and then we turned off the entire click, and every subsequent part, including the synth, including any of the senses of rhythm and patterns that are going on, were tracked to only the musical lines that were tracked. So it started with a single cello part, just so there could be a continuity of motion when we're tracking the other ones. One thing I love about this is that there are imperfections. I'm going to point one out. It was maybe not a good idea, but I want you to listen to this bass part. And notice how, as you could hear already there, it feels very uneven. But in the context of the track, each of the cello parts have their own slight flavor. They're working with one another. They're not being exact to a click track. They're being exact to one another, which I think some of my favorite rock pop music, that's what it does. And that's what classical and chamber music are. I play in a quartet. That's how we play. That to me is an aspect that makes it very human, which is also an aspect in this entire project with these tracks for this idea of newness and continued expression, is to bring as much humanity to it in the form of sound. I don't mean humanity as a philosophical idea. I mean it as a literal thing. And part of that is that imperfection that is not there to pull someone out or to show that, hey, we're not perfect. It's the natural nuance that happens in a performance, trying to capture that here in the box. But now that you know all of that, listen, maybe it's too much for you, but maybe it adds a sense of intrigue or humanity. Now I could go in and edit that, right? I could expand it here and I could move each note to make it line up. But I'm just not interested in that because it doesn't pull me out as a listener. When there's all the different layers there, I don't hear it as what needs to be perfect rhythm. I can still bob my head. I can still feel where it's going. It feels very natural. And that's what you're going to, for example, get like in an orchestra. When you have a full section playing, I think in a lot of modern pop music, even a lot of rock music, that over quantization of rhythmic pulses, it's done to make it sound more perfect and better maybe. Yet to me, the more it's like that, the more it pulls me out because it feels like this is not a human playing at all, which is also part of what we're exploring in the story of We Are Connected, is what is it to be human? What is it to be AI? And what happens when they start commingling? Because we're living that out. And ultimately that is the point of these tracks, is to help tell that story in a way that could only be told through these tracks, and then in combination with others, the text and the sound videos, to really examine each track in many different ways. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Chapter 5 comes out next week, and that's going to be quite a departure in the story from what these first 4 tracks have been. Thanks for checking this out, and see you next time.